All right. Miracles of the Fathers. These commence about the middle of the 2nd century. More than 100 years ago, Reverend Dr. Middleton, in his free inquiry into the miraculous powers of the Christian Church, called attention to the fact that in the writings of the Apostolic Fathers, referring to those who had written previous to about AD 150, there was not the least pretense to the possession of extraordinary gifts, nor to any standing power of working miracles, and showed that the claim in the 2nd century was first set up about the time of Justin Martyr. Here then, said he, we have an interval of about a half century, the earliest and purest of all Christian antiquity, after the days of the apostles, in which we find not the least reference to any standing power of working miracles. In the writings of Justin Martyr, AD 150 to 160, the claim to miraculous power was put forth with much distinctness. He says, there are prophetical gifts among us at this day, and both men and women are endued with extraordinary powers by the Spirit of God. He frequently appeals to what he says everyone might see with his own eyes in every part of the world, and particularly in Rome, in the case of persons possessed with devils, who were cured and set free, and the devils themselves baffled and driven away by the Christians adjuring and exorcising them in the name of Jesus, when all other exorcists and enchanters had tried in vain to help them. Just as the angels to whom God had committed the care of mankind had been led away by love of the daughters of men and begat children who are the demons who have corrupted the human race. He thinks demonics are possessed and tortured by the souls of the wicked dead. Irenaeus affirms that all who are truly disciples of Jesus, receiving grace from him, wrought miracles in his name for the good of mankind, according to the gift which each man had received. Some cast out devils, so that those from whom they were ejected often turned believers and continued in the church. Others had the knowledge of future events, visions, and prophetical sayings. Others healed the sick by the imposition of hands. Even the dead had been raised and lived afterward many years among them. It was impossible to reckon up all the mighty works which the church performed every day to the benefit of nations. In regard to raising from the dead, he declares it to have been frequently performed on necessary occasions, when by great fasting and the joint supplication of the church of that place, the spirit of the dead person returned to him, and the man was given back to the prayers of the saints. Again, we have many, says he, in the church endued with prophetic gifts, speaking with all kinds of tongues, laying open the secrets of men for the public good. Clement of Alexandria, AD 200, says, presiding angels were distributed over nations and cities, that the Son gave philosophy to the Greeks by means of the inferior angels, and argued that it was absurd to attribute it to the devil. Tertullian calls upon the heathen magistrates to summon before their tribunal any persons possessed with a devil, and if the evil spirit, when exercised by any Christian whatsoever, did not own himself to be a devil, as truly as in other places he would falsely call himself a god, not daring to tell a lie to a Christian, that then they should take the life of that Christian. Again, there is a sister among us endued with the gifts of revelations, which she suffers in the church during the time of divine service by an ecstasy in the spirit. She converses with angels and sometimes also with the Lord. She sees and hears mysteries and knows the hearts of some and prescribes medicines to those who want them. He has a disquisition concerning angels and demons, in which he enters into minute details. He gives the case of a woman who went to a theater and came back possessed by a demon, and on being cast out, the evil spirit said he had a right to act as he did, having found her within his limits. Origen was of the opinion that certain demons, offspring of the Titans or giants, who haunt the grosser parts of bodies and the unclean places of the earth, had the power of divining the future. After fully discussing the question and citing many passages of Scripture, he comes to the conclusion that the sun, moon, and stars are living, rational beings. He says many could heal the sick by invoking the name of God over them, and of Jesus with a recital of some story of his life. I myself says he have seen many so healed in difficult cases, loss of senses, madness, and innumerable other evils which neither men nor devils could cure. Theophilus, Bishop of Antioch, AD 180, says that evil and seducing spirits were exorcised and cast out in his day. Minucius Felix, 3rd century, addressing himself to his heathen friend in the dialogue of Octavius, says the greatest part of you know what confessions the demons make concerning themselves as oft as they are expelled by us out of the bodies of men by the torture of our words and the fire of our speech. Saturn himself and Serapis and Jupiter and the rest of them whom you worship, constrained by the pain which they feel, confess what they are. Cyprian, AD 250, Arnobius, AD 303, and Lactantius, AD 310, all give testimony in similar language to the casting out of devils and evil spirits by the Christians. Eusebius had similar views. Tertullian relates that a woman whom he knew, a member of the church, after having died while the presbyter was praying for her, removed her hands from her sides and folded them in the attitude of supplication. Even the great Augustine relates a number of most astounding miracles which were performed in the church in his immediate neighborhood. The Thundering Legion. Eusebius quotes from a lost work of Claudius Apollinaris his account of a remarkable answer to prayer received about AD 175 by the Christian soldiers of the Emperor Marcus Aurelius in his war with the Quadri. Tertullian, writing about AD 200 in a public apology, also urges the same fact. The incident referred to was this. It is said that when Marcus Aurelius Caesar was forming his troops in order of battle against the Germans and Samaritans, he was reduced to extremities by the failure of water. Thereupon, in answer to the prayers of the Christian soldiers of the Melitine Legion, so called, there came thunderbolts which caused the enemy's flight and overthrow, and upon the emperor's army a rain which restored it entirely when it was all but perishing by thirst. This circumstance was mentioned not because there is any miracle connected with it even in appearance, since there is nothing miraculous in a sudden shower or in a superstitious people being frightened by thunderbolts, but because of the great prominence which has been given to it in what might be called miraculous literature. Much has been written about it. Dion Cassius attributes the occurrence and the preservation of the army to the Egyptian magician by the name of Amuphis. Julius Capitolinus attributes it to the emperor's prayers. Themistius the same. Baromnius, Moyle, Scaliger, Velasis, and others have written about it. More recently, the late Cardinal Newman devoted 14 pages to it, at the close of which he concludes it to have been a very noted miracle. There was no doubt an occurrence of the kind, the army, when in dire extremity, having been relieved by a sudden fall of rain. This we learn from Dion Cassius and other heathen writers, and from a sculpture of the celebrated Antonine Column at Rome, where is a figure of Jupiter Pluvius scattering lightning and rain, the enemy and their horses lying prostrate, and the Romans, sword in hand, rushing upon them. We hear nothing of any connection of Christians in the transaction, except from Tertullian and Eusebius and those who copied from them. As to the Christian legion, called, according to Eusebius, the Melitine Legion, which he represents as afterward remaining intact, Moyle says there were few or no Christians in the army, and adds, I would as soon believe my Lord Marlborough had a whole regiment of Quakers in his army as that Antonius had a whole legion of Christians in his. Then as to the name thundering applied to the Melitine Legion, which Eusebius makes Apollinaris say the emperor gave to it on account of this transaction, the fact is that one of the Roman legions had that name from the time of Augustus Caesar, returning water into oil. Narcissus, bishop of Jerusalem, when oil failed for lamps at the vigil of Easter, sent the persons who had the care of them to the neighboring well for water. When they brought it, he prayed over it, and it was changed into oil. At least so says Eusebius. Narcissus was made bishop about 180. This reported miracle has been the occasion of learned disquisitions by Dodwell, Jortin, and many others. Newman devotes several pages to it and closes by saying that while he cannot say positively that he believes it, yet he has no doubt about it. From the list of noted miracles discussed by Dr. Newman, those who have been mentioned because they are said to have occurred in the 2nd century. It is a significant fact that they both come either originally or with important ascensions from Eusebius. Apocryphal writings. From the middle of the 2nd century and even earlier, the Christian world has flooded with anonymous writings of religious character filled with miracles of every description. There was a morbid demand for that kind of literature. At a later day, these writings were styled apocryphal. There were Gospels, Acts, Revelations, Epistles, etc., etc. The revelation of Moses gives a long history of Adam and Eve. The revelation of Esther resembles somewhat the apocalypse of John. The revelation of Paul is of the same sort, relating at great length the wonderful things revealed to Paul when he went up to the 3rd heaven and was caught up into paradise and heard unspeakable words. There is another revelation of John, the book of John, concerning the falling asleep of Mary, the passing of Mary, etc. The Acts of Peter and Paul, the Acts of Paul and Thesia, and the story of Perpetua have already been mentioned. The Acts of Barnabas relates the journeyings, the miracles, and martyrdom of that apostle. Finding a town called Curium was very wicked, he rebuked it, and the western part fell, so that many were wounded, and many of them also died. The Acts of Philip, Nicanora, wife of the proconsul of Hierapolis, having been converted and healed of her sickness by the preaching of Philip, her husband was so enraged that he caused them both with Bartholomew to be scourged and the 2 apostles to be hanged. Philip head downward. In this position, Philip has a long conversation with Bartholomew and preaches a discourse to those standing about. When Miriam was stripped, her body was changed and became a glass chest filled with light. The Acts and martyrdom of Andrew. Andrew has a discussion with Agates, the proconsul. Agates, becoming very angry, has Andrew crucified. Afterwards, he was himself tormented by the devil and came to a violent death. Besides these, there were the Acts of Andrew and Matthias in the city of the man-eater, the Acts of Peter and Andrew, the Acts of and martyrdom of St. Matthew, the Acts of the Holy Apostle Thomas, and many others. Fabricius has a list of apocryphal acts, 36 in number. Some of them are written very much in the style of the Acts of the Apostles. Acts of Paul. Dr. Lardner thinks that Origen referred to a book entitled The Acts of Paul. All right. The miracles of the New Testament. When we turn to the miracles of the New Testament, we instinctively feel like making them an exception to the mass of wonders of that age. How much of this feeling may be owing to education and association, we will not stop to inquire, and perhaps it would not be found easy to determine. The fact, however, cannot be ignored that there is no evidence showing that either of the 5 books in which these miracles are recorded was written until nearly 150 years after the transactions are said to have occurred. How much earlier the manuscripts existed from which these books were compiled is not known. None of them can be clearly traced to the 1st century. There are other important considerations. A number of these miracles consist in casting out demons from human beings, but the doctrine of demons is a doctrine of the past. It is now recognized and admitted that from the beginning the demons have existed only subjectively as forms of doctrine and belief. What then becomes of this class of miracles? If without irreverence, we carefully examine even the most imposing class of New Testament miracles, looking upon them at the same time as violations of known laws of nature, without which a miracle loses its force and meaning, we meet with very serious obstacles in the way of giving them implicit credence. In the case of Jairus' daughter, we have but to take the explicit language of Jesus himself. The maid is not dead, but sleepeth. There are 2 other reported cases of raising from the dead in the canonical Gospels. The raising of the son of the widow of Nain is found only in the compilation of Luke. The authorship of the manuscript containing it and the time when it was written are involved in obscurity. The raising of Lazarus and the turning of water into wine, the two transactions most plainly contravening the laws of nature, are only related in the Gospel of John, the author of that work having probably taken them from the Acts of Pilate. Why do the other canonical Gospels contain no mention of those stupendous miracles? How can the belief in the miracles be of any importance in the Christian system? If the doctrines and precepts of the Christian religion are adapted to the nature of man and in harmony with the divine economy of the universe, they will stand through all time. If not, they will fall. The changing of one element or substance into another, or even the raising of a person from the dead, cannot make wrong right or change the truth into a falsehood. This great truth was all but comprehended by Tertullian, intellectually the most vigorous of all the early fathers. He declared that the proof of the Christian religion by miracles was inconclusive because, says he, Jesus Christ has assured his disciples that some would arise who should work false miracles. Archbishop Trench falls into the same line of argument. A miracle does not prove the truth of a doctrine or the divine mission of him that brings it to pass. The doctrine must first commend itself to the conscience as being good, and only then can the miracle seal it as divine. The same view is taken from Mosley and others. But if the doctrine has received the sanction of the conscience as good, is it not already divine? And what need of the miracle after?